Ethan was an ordinary man, or at least that was what everyone around him believed. He worked as a technician on Orion Station, one of the largest hubs between human colonies and alien civilizations. The station floated like a glittering wheel above a blue-green planet, its long arms reaching out into the silence of space. Every day, thousands of ships came and went, carrying traders, soldiers, explorers, and diplomats. For Ethan, though, it was just a job. He spent his hours fixing faulty circuits, adjusting power grids, and repairing communication panels. Yet inside his heart, he often felt a quiet emptiness. It was not because he disliked his work. In truth, he was skilled, and others respected him for his steady hands and quick thinking. The emptiness came from something else, a memory. It was faint, like the fading lines of a dream. He remembered being a boy, playing in a field near his old home on Earth. He remembered meeting a girl, unusual and strange, with eyes that shimmered like the night sky. She spoke words he never forgot. One day, we will see the stars together. Einar. The time, Ethan thought it was a child's game. They played, laughed, and spoke of promises that seemed silly when he grew older. But as years passed, the memory refused to leave him. Sometimes at night he would lie awake and wonder if that girl had been real or just a figment of his imagination. One morning, Ethan walked through the station's wide corridors, carrying his toolkit. He was on his way to repair a faulty power regulator in one of the docking bays. Around him, banners and flags were being hung by staff. Soldiers marched in polished uniforms, and officers gave quick commands. The air was tense, filled with excitement and caution. Something important was about to happen. A fellow technician, Marcus, slapped Ethan on the shoulder. "Big day today, my friend," Marcus said. "We've got visitors from the Lyari Empire, a full royal delegation. You'd better stay out of the upper levels unless you want a guard breathing down your neck." Ethan raised his brows. "The Lyari? That's rare. What's the occasion?" "Negotiations," Marcus replied with a shrug. "Humans and Lyari are supposed to strengthen ties. The Emperor is sending his daughter. A princess, if you can believe that." Ethan laughed lightly, though a small part of him was curious. A real alien princess walking through the halls of Orion Station. That was something he had never imagined seeing. Still, he shook his head and focused on his task. Royalty and politics were none of his concern. Later that day, when the delegation arrived, the entire docking bay transformed into a stage. Guards lined the area, their armor polished and gleaming. Officials stood in perfect rows, waiting to greet the Lyari visitors. Ethan, having just completed his repair work, tried to slip out quietly. He had no desire to be in the way of ambassadors or soldiers, but fate, as it often does, had other plans. He paused near the edge of the crowd, his eyes drawn to the sight of the Lyari delegation. Tall figures stepped down from their sleek silver ship. They had elegant features, their skin faintly luminous under the lights, and their clothing woven with threads that seemed to capture starlight itself. At the center of the group was a young woman. Her posture was graceful, her head held high, yet her expression carried a softness that made her stand out. Her eyes swept over the crowd, calm and steady. Then, for one brief moment, they stopped on Ethan. The world seemed to freeze. Those eyes, he knew them. He had seen them before, long ago in that field on Earth. The memory struck him so hard that his breath caught in his throat. It couldn't be. It was impossible. She was an alien princess, and he was just a station technician. But the memory of that childhood promise flared in his mind like fire. The princess's lips parted slightly and she whispered something under her breath. Ethan could not hear it fully, but he recognized the rhythm of the words. It was the promise, the very same promise they had once made as children. Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him. His heart pounded, and confusion filled his thoughts. Could this be real? Could she truly be the same girl from his memory? The ceremony continued around him. Officials welcomed the delegation, speeches were made, and the crowd clapped politely. Yet Ethan could not shake the feeling that the princess's gaze kept returning to him, hidden behind her calm demeanor. That night, Ethan could not sleep. He lay on his narrow bunk, staring at the ceiling of his quarters. The images replayed in his mind. The princess's eyes, her whispered words, the unshakable memory of their childhood bond. He remembered the way she once laughed as they chased each other under the setting sun, the way her voice carried secrets about stars and faraway places. Am I losing my mind? Ethan muttered to himself. Or was she real all along? The next day, his work took him to one of the station's gardens, a place filled with trees, flowers, and running water meant to remind humans of Earth. As he checked a malfunctioning light panel, footsteps approached. He turned and froze. The princess stood there dressed in simple attire without her guards. Her expression was calm, but her eyes carried a storm of emotions. "You remember?" she said softly. Ethan's hands shook slightly. "Remember what?" "The promise," she replied. "You thought I forgot, but I never did." Her words cut through him like a blade of truth. Suddenly, everything fell into place. The strange memory of his childhood friend, the eyes that never left his heart, the whispers of stars and destiny. She had been real. She had always been real. And now she stood before him, not as a child, but as a princess of another world. Ethan struggled for words. His mind swirled with questions, doubts, and emotions he could not name. But deep within him, a spark of something long buried came alive again. The promise was not forgotten. It had only been waiting. Ethan stood frozen in the garden, the sound of flowing water behind him, the soft glow of the artificial sky above. The princess, Lyra, looked at him with the same quiet intensity he remembered from childhood. The world felt smaller now, as if the space station with its grand halls and humming machines had shrunk to just this one moment between the two of them. Ethan's voice came out in a whisper. "It was you. All this time, it was really you." Lyra nodded. Her lips curved into the faintest of smiles, but her eyes carried something deeper, something heavy. "I never forgot," she said. "I couldn't forget. Do you think a princess has the freedom to hold memories like this and keep them close? Yet I did." Ethan sat slowly on the bench by the fountain, still in shock. He rubbed his forehead as if trying to wake from a dream. "I thought you were just, I don't know, a figment of my imagination. A childhood game. I told myself I made it up." "You didn't," Lyra said, stepping closer. "When I was young, my people visited Earth in secret. It was not allowed, but I was curious. My attendants let me slip away for a short while. That's when I met you. You were a boy who looked at the stars with wonder, and when you spoke, I felt like I had known you forever." Ethan stared at her, struggling to reconcile the memory of a laughing little girl in the fields of Earth with the regal woman standing before him. She was older now, graceful and strong, dressed in garments that shimmered faintly with woven light. Yet her eyes, those eyes, had not changed at all. He found his voice again. "But why now? After all these years, why are you here? Why look for me?" Lyra's expression softened, but her shoulders carried tension. "Because my life is not mine, Ethan. I am the daughter of the Emperor. Every step I take is planned. Every word I speak weighed. And yet," she paused, her voice trembling just slightly, "the memory of you has always been with me. It is the only thing that felt like it belonged to me, and not to the crown." Ethan felt his chest tighten. "Lyra?" She shook her head quickly as though stopping herself from saying more. "I shouldn't even be speaking with you. If my guards find out, if the council learns I came here, there will be questions. But I couldn't stay silent. I had to see you again. I had to know if you remembered." "I remembered," Ethan said firmly, surprising even himself. His voice was stronger now. "Even when I doubted, even when I told myself it was impossible, the memory stayed. I thought it was crazy, but I never let it go. For the first time since arriving on the station, Lyra smiled fully. It wasn't the polite, careful smile of a princess greeting diplomats. It was warm, unguarded, and filled with relief. Then, "The promise still stands," she whispered. Silence fell between them, broken only by the gentle splash of water in the fountain. Ethan's mind raced. He wanted to ask everything. Why she had been on Earth, how she could appear human then, what this promise truly meant to her now. But before he could speak, voices echoed down the path. Lyra straightened instantly, her royal composure snapping back into place. "I must go," she said quickly. "Meet me tomorrow night, here when the station grows quiet." "Wait," Ethan began, but she was already gone, disappearing into the shadows of the garden as her guards' voices grew louder. That night, Ethan lay awake again, staring at the ceiling of his quarters. His thoughts churned like restless waves. He had questions without answers. What was he supposed to do with this knowledge? She was a princess, a figure of galactic importance, while he was just a technician. Yet she had sought him out, remembered him when the rest of the galaxy barely noticed his existence. The next day, the station buzzed with activity. Negotiations with the Lyari delegation filled every hall with chatter. Ethan overheard whispers as he worked. Trade agreements, security pacts, and most of all, rumors about the princess's future. Some claimed she was to be married soon to a prince from another world, sealing an alliance that would bring peace between warring factions of her people. The thought struck Ethan like a blade, married to someone else. A memory of her smile, her whispered words, and their childhood promise tightened in his chest. He told himself it was none of his business, that he had no right to feel such things. But deep down, he knew the truth. He cared. He always had. That evening, as the artificial lights dimmed to mimic night, Ethan returned to the garden. The station's halls were quieter now, the rush of visitors fading into hushed corridors. He sat on the same bench, his heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and fear. Minutes passed. Then, softly, she appeared. Lyra wore a plain cloak this time, her royal garments hidden, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked less like a princess and more like the girl he once knew. "You came," she said, her voice low but warm. "I had to," Ethan replied. They sat together, side by side, the fountain's glow painting ripples of light across their faces. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan finally asked, "Why did you promise me back then? Why me?" Lyra's gaze drifted upward, toward the ceiling where artificial stars twinkled faintly. "Because you treated me as if I were not different. You didn't see a princess, or a stranger. You saw a friend. I was a child who felt trapped by rules even then, and yet with you I felt free. That promise was not just about the stars. It was about freedom, about belonging." Ethan swallowed hard. "And now? Do you still feel the same?" Lyra turned to him, her eyes shining with unspoken emotion. "More than ever. But my life is bound, Ethan. There are chains you cannot see, chains of duty, of bloodlines, of politics. I want to break them, but I fear what it would cost. For me. For you." Her words hung heavy in the air. Ethan wanted to tell her he would stand beside her no matter the cost, that he would fight even against empires for the sake of their promise. But he also knew the weight she carried was not something easily defied. Instead, he said simply, "Then let me at least share the burden. Even if I can't change your world, I can stand with you." Lyra looked at him for a long time, her expression softening. She reached out, her fingers brushing against his hand, a small gesture, yet filled with meaning. "That is all I wanted," she whispered, "to know I was not alone." The moment was fragile, like glass that could shatter with the slightest touch, but it was real. Before leaving, Lyra gave him one last glance. "Ethan, I cannot promise where this path will lead, but I promise this. Whatever happens, I will not let them erase what we shared. Our promise is not broken." As she vanished, Once more into the shadows, Ethan sat in silence, his heart burning with a mix of hope and dread. The world had shifted, and he knew nothing would ever be the same again. The following days passed with a strange weight hanging over Ethan. Every time he walked the station's busy corridors, he felt as if eyes followed him. The Lyari delegation was everywhere. Guards in polished armor, advisors moving swiftly, with tablets in hand, translators whispering into small devices. The entire station had become a stage for political theater, and Ethan felt like an invisible man walking through it all. But he was not invisible to Lyra. Each night, when the station grew quiet and the crowds thinned, she found him in the garden. They spoke in hushed voices by the fountain, like children hiding secrets from the world. She told him of her people's customs, of the grand palaces made from crystal and stone, of the endless ceremonies she endured. Ethan listened, amazed, but also saddened, for behind every tale of beauty was a thread of sorrow. "You see gardens and music," she told him one night, her cloak pulled tight around her shoulders. "But what you don't see are the rules, the endless rules, whom I must speak to, what I must say, who I must smile at, and soon, whom I must marry." The word cut deep into Ethan's chest. He had heard rumors, but hearing it from her lips made it real. "You don't want to," Ethan said softly. "No," Lyra admitted. "The council insists. They say it is necessary to keep peace between the two strongest houses of our empire. If I refuse, I risk war. If I obey, I lose myself." Ethan clenched his fists. He wanted to tell her to fight, to resist, to run away with him, but he also knew the truth. He was only a technician. What power did he have against entire empires? He lowered his voice. "And what about us? About the promise?" Lyra's eyes softened, but sorrow flickered within them. "That is why I came to you, Ethan. I wanted you to know that even if duty forces me down that path, I never forgot. You were my truth, my freedom. If I lose that, I lose everything." Her words made his heart ache. He wanted to reach out, to hold her hand as he had done before, but the sound of footsteps in the distance forced them apart. Lyra pulled back her cloak and straightened. "I must go. If they see us, it will bring trouble for you." Ethan nodded, though his chest burned, with helplessness. She walked away, her figure melting into the shadows. The next morning, the station was alive with noise. Ethan was called to repair the main communication grid. The system had overloaded due to the massive amount of transmissions sent between human officials and the Lyari delegation. As he worked, he overheard snippets of conversations. The princess is to be engaged formally within the week. The Lyari court demands a ceremony here on the station as a symbol of unity. The human leaders are thrilled. They think this will secure peace for decades. Every word was like a stone pressing against Ethan's chest. Later that day, as he walked back toward his quarters, he passed a wide hall lined with banners. At the far end stood the princess herself, surrounded by her guards and advisors. She was dressed in ceremonial attire this time, her gown shimmering like liquid silver, her crown glinting in the station's light. She looked every bit the royal, daughter of an empire. Their eyes met for the briefest of moments. Neither spoke, but Ethan saw it. Beneath her calm, noble mask, her eyes still carried the same warmth, the same sadness. A guard noticed his gaze and stepped toward him. Ethan quickly looked away and continued down the hall, his pulse racing. He felt as though he had trespassed into a place where he did not belong. That night, Ethan returned to the garden. He waited, his thoughts restless, his heart heavy. When Lyra finally arrived, she seemed more tired than before. "They are watching me more closely now," she said, sitting beside him on the bench. "They suspect I am distracted." "You are distracted," Ethan said, his voice low but steady. "By me?" Lyra gave a faint smile. "Yes, and yet I don't regret it." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the fountain. Finally, Ethan spoke. "Run away with me." Lyra turned to him, startled. "I know I have nothing," Ethan said quickly. "I'm just a technician. I don't have power or armies. But I'll protect you, Lyra. We could leave this station, find some quiet world where no one knows us. We could live free. For a moment, she looked tempted. Her eyes softened, and her lips parted as if she might agree. But then her expression hardened with reality. She shook her head slowly. If I run, my people will suffer, she whispered. If I abandon the role I was born into, the Empire will fall into chaos. Thousands, maybe millions, could pay the price. How could I carry that burden on my conscience? No, Ethan, my chains are not mine alone. They bind all of us. Ethan lowered his head. He knew she was right, but it didn't make the pain easier to bear. The following day brought chaos. A minor explosion rattled one of the docking bays. Saboteurs had attempted to damage the Lyari delegation's ship. Panic spread quickly, and security doubled across the station. Ethan was among those called to assist with emergency repairs. As he worked among sparking wires and damaged panels, he overheard officials whispering. The attack was no accident. It was part of a larger plot. Some factions wanted the princess dead to prevent her marriage from uniting the Empire. The realization chilled him. If enemies existed even within her own people, she was in greater danger than he had imagined. That night, when he met Lyra again, he told her what he had learned. She nodded grimly. I know, she said. There are those who see my marriage as a threat to their power. They would rather see me silenced than bound to another house. That is why I cannot escape. If I disappear, they will hunt me. But if I stay, they may still try to end me. Ethan's heart pounded. Then let me protect you. You already have, Lyra said softly. With your words, with your promise. Do you think I have endured all of this without that memory? Without you? Her words struck him with both pride and pain. She saw him as her anchor, her secret strength, yet he felt powerless in the face of the storm around her. As the days grew closer to the planned ceremony, the station transformed into a palace of lights and banners. Human and Lyari officials walked side by side, speaking of peace and progress. But beneath the surface, Ethan felt the storm building. The promise of his childhood was alive, but it was trapped within walls of duty, politics, and danger. And he knew that soon something would break. For as much as Lyra belonged to her people, part of her still belonged to him, and Ethan was not ready to let go. The day of the great ceremony arrived. Orion Station shone brighter than ever before. Banners of both human colonies and the Lyari Empire lined the halls, shimmering with pride. Soldiers in formal uniforms guarded every corner, and officials walked with rigid shoulders, whispering about the historic day that would mark the unity of two great powers. To Ethan, though, the day carried no joy. He stood among the maintenance crew, watching from the edges of the main hall. The place had been transformed into a throne-like chamber, with a long carpet leading to a raised platform where the Lyari princess would stand. He saw her arrive, dressed in a gown that glittered like the surface of a calm ocean under moonlight. Her crown rested lightly on her dark hair, and her every step carried the grace of a royal daughter. But Ethan saw what others could not. Behind her calm expression was a storm of sorrow. She walked as if her heart was breaking with each step. Lyra stood on the platform as Lyari elders spoke in their ancient language. The human delegation clapped politely, while translators whispered into small devices for them. The words floated over Ethan's head, but he did not need to understand the details. He knew what this ceremony meant. It meant goodbye. Suddenly the lights flickered. At first it seemed like a minor fault, the kind Ethan often repaired. But then a shadow moved high above, where the glass dome arched over the chamber. Ethan's eyes caught it immediately. A figure slipping through the rafters holding something long and sharp. His heart froze. An assassin. The guards had not seen. The officials were too focused on the ceremony. Even Lyra stood unaware, her hands folded neatly in front of her. Without thinking, Ethan moved. He shoved past the line of technicians racing across the edge of the chamber. His mind screamed with fear, but his body acted faster than thought. He leapt onto the platform just as the shadow above released the weapon, a spear tipped with glimmering crystal, aimed directly at Lyra. Ethan threw himself forward. The spear struck his shoulder instead of her chest. Pain exploded through him, but he stayed on his feet, his body shielding hers. Gasps filled the hall. Guards rushed in, their weapons raised, scanning the rafters. The assassin tried to flee, but was caught in a web of light as Lyari soldiers unleashed their energy nets. The crowd roared with confusion, fear, and anger, but none of that mattered to Ethan. His world narrowed to the woman standing behind him. Lyra's eyes were wide, her voice trembling. "Ethan." He staggered but smiled faintly through the pain. "I promised. I'd protect you." The guards dragged the assassin away and chaos spread through the hall. Human and Lyari officials shouted over one another, each demanding answers. But the attention of the room soon turned to Ethan. A mere human technician had thrown himself in front of the princess, saving her life when even her royal guards had failed. A Lyari elder pointed at him. "Who is this man?" Ethan felt the weight of hundreds of eyes, but before he could speak, Lyra stepped forward. She touched his uninjured arm, steadying him, and faced her people with a voice that carried power and fire. "He is no ordinary man," she declared. "He is the one who kept a promise when no one else dared. He is the one who shielded me with his own life when others only watched." Her words silenced the chamber. The guards lowered their weapons. The officials froze mid-sentence. Even the human leaders stared, stunned. The Lyari elder frowned. "Princess, he is a technician. Nothing more." "Nothing more?" Lyra's voice rang clear. "Then why is it that he saved me when all of you failed? Why is it that he carries more courage than armies?" The elder faltered, unable to reply. Later, in the privacy of a medical bay, Ethan sat on a bed as medics tended to his wound. It was painful, but not life-threatening. He gritted his teeth as they worked, though his thoughts were only on Lyra. She stood nearby, her hands clasped, her gaze fixed on him. "You could have died," she whispered. "I couldn't let that happen to you," Ethan said simply. "Not after everything. Not after our promise." Lyra's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She moved closer, her voice low but steady. "Do you know what you've done? You've changed everything. My people saw your courage. They saw the truth of your heart. Even the council cannot ignore it now." Ethan raised his brows. "What do you mean?" "The marriage," she said firmly. "The arrangement was built on the claim that no one else could protect me, that I needed the alliance to survive. But today, you proved otherwise. You showed them strength they cannot dismiss. The council's argument is broken." Ethan blinked in disbelief. Could it be true? Could one act of courage shake the foundations of an empire's politics? The next day, the station's atmosphere had changed. Whispers filled every corridor. Some called Ethan reckless. Others called him a hero. For the first time in his life, he was not invisible. Everywhere he walked, eyes followed him, not with suspicion but with respect. When Lyra addressed her council in the grand chamber, Ethan stood quietly at the side. She spoke with fire in her words, her voice commanding. "You would bind me to a stranger for the sake of safety. But yesterday proved the truth. Safety does not come from alliances written on paper. It comes from trust, from loyalty, from the courage to act when danger strikes. Ethan, a human technician, showed more loyalty to me than entire armies. I will not marry for politics. I will not give up my promise." The council erupted in argument, voices rising like a storm. But Lyra did not flinch. She stood tall, her eyes burning with conviction. Ethan watched her with awe. She was no longer just the girl he remembered, nor only the princess of a distant empire. She was a leader, one who carried both sorrow and strength, bound by duty but not broken by it. And she had chosen to stand with him. That night, Lyra met Ethan once again in the garden. The fountain glowed softly, its waters calm after the storm. "You've changed everything," she said quietly. I didn't mean to, Ethan replied with a faint smile. I just couldn't stand by. Lyra stepped closer, her eyes filled with warmth. That is why you matter. You act not for power, not for gain, but for what is right. That is what makes you different. That is why I never forgot. They stood together in silence, the weight of their promise hanging between them. For the first time, Ethan felt hope. Not just for them, but for a future that might defy the chains of duty. The barriers had cracked. The world had seen his courage, and Lyra had found her voice. But Ethan knew the battle was not over. Forces still moved in the shadows, enemies who wanted her silenced, who would not rest until their plan succeeded. The storm was not yet finished. The station was quieter after the failed assassination, yet the air remained tense. Soldiers patrolled the halls, officials whispered in corners, and the Liari Council met day and night. Everyone had an opinion about what should be done with Princess Lyra, and with Ethan, the human who had stood between her and death. Ethan, meanwhile, tried to return to his normal duties. He fixed circuits, checked power grids, and replaced broken panels, but wherever he went, people recognized him. Some nodded in respect, others whispered his name. A few even clapped him on the back, calling him a hero. Ethan felt uncomfortable with the attention. He had not saved Lyra to be seen or celebrated. He had done it because of a promise made long ago. Yet deep inside, he could not deny the spark of pride. For once, he had mattered. Lyra, however, was far from free. The council pressed her harder than before. They argued that her safety had already been proven fragile, that Ethan's bravery was a mere accident, and that an arranged marriage was still the only path to stability. Lyra stood her ground, but the council was stubborn. During one heated meeting, she rose to her feet and let her voice cut through the chamber. You speak of stability, she declared, but you ignore truth. A life bound by fear and forced. Duty is not stable, it is broken. Yesterday, when danger came, it was not an alliance or an army that saved me. It was one man's courage. That man is Ethan. He is not of noble blood, but his heart is nobler than any crown. The hall fell silent. Some council members looked shocked, others outraged. A few exchanged uneasy glances. One elder spoke harshly. Princess, are you suggesting that this human is to take the place of a prince? That you would defy centuries of tradition for him? Lyra's eyes blazed with determination. I am not suggesting it. I am declaring it. The promise I made as a child still lives, and I will honor it. Word spread quickly through the station. Some mocked the idea. How could a princess of the Liari Empire choose a human technician? Others, however, whispered with wonder. Perhaps this was the start of something new, something stronger than politics and tradition. Ethan heard the rumors while working in the docking bays. He felt both terrified and overwhelmed. Could it be true? Did Lyra truly mean to choose him in front of her people? That night, he met her in the garden once more. The fountain glowed softly as always, the only witness to their secret meetings. You said it, Ethan whispered when she arrived. You told them about me. Yes, Lyra said firmly, and I will not take it back. Ethan shook his head in disbelief. Do you understand what this means? They'll fight you. They'll say you're unfit to rule. They'll try to separate us. Lyra stepped closer, her voice strong. Let them. They have tried to shape my life since I was born. But for once, I will shape my own future. And I choose you, Ethan. Her words left him breathless. He wanted to argue, to warn her of the risks, but her eyes silenced him. She had made her choice, not as a child longing for freedom, not as a princess bound by duty, but as a woman who remembered a promise and refused to let it die. The final confrontation came during a grand assembly in the station's ceremonial hall. Leaders from both humans and Liari gathered to hear the council's decision. The atmosphere was tense, filled with sharp whispers and expectant stares. Lyra stood at the center, her gown glowing faintly like woven starlight. Ethan stood nearby, unsure if he should even be there, but she had insisted. Guards flanked the walls, their weapons gleaming. The council elder stepped forward. Princess Lyra, he said coldly, your defiance has placed this delegation in danger. Your personal feelings cannot outweigh the survival of our empire. You will agree to the marriage, or we will strip you of your title. The hall fell silent. All eyes turned to her. Lyra lifted her chin proudly. Then strip it from me. Take the crown, take the title, take the throne, but you cannot take my promise, you cannot take my heart. Gasps echoed across the chamber. Even the human leaders exchanged stunned looks. Lyra turned, her eyes locking on Ethan. You thought I forgot, she said, her voice carrying through the hall. But I never did. And I never will. Ethan is the one I choose. Not because of power, not because of politics, but because of truth. Her words rang like thunder, shaking the silence. For a moment, chaos threatened. Some elders shouted, demanding order. Others looked uncertain, whispering among themselves. But the people, the guards, the attendants, the lower officials reacted differently. They began to clap, first softly, then louder, until the hall echoed with the sound. The wave of approval spread, drowning out the angry voices of the council. Even, some of the elders fell silent, realizing the tide had shifted. The people had seen Lyra's courage, just as they had seen Ethan's, and in that courage, they found something stronger than tradition. After the assembly, Ethan and Lyra stood, together on the station's observation deck, staring out at the endless stars. The tension of the day still lingered, but for the first time Ethan felt hope blooming instead of fear. You changed everything today, he said softly. No, Lyra replied, shaking her head gently. We changed everything. It was our promise that brought us here. A promise made under the sky of your world, fulfilled now among the stars. Ethan looked at her, his chest heavy with emotion. I never thought you'd remember. She smiled, the same smile he remembered from long ago. How could I forget the only thing that was truly mine? They stood in silence side by side, watching as 1,000 ships moved like fireflies across the dark. The stars stretched endless before them, and for the first time, the future felt endless too. In the days that followed, the council reluctantly accepted what the people had already embraced. Lyra's decision could not be undone, not without risking rebellion from her own citizens, who had seen her bravery and chosen to follow her. The arranged marriage was dissolved. The Lyari Empire entered negotiations with humans not through forced alliances, but through shared respect. As for Ethan, he was no longer just a technician. He became a symbol, a reminder that courage and loyalty mattered more than crowns and bloodlines. People across the station spoke his name not with disbelief but with admiration, and though Ethan often felt overwhelmed by the attention, he held on to one truth above all. He had not become important because of power or fame. He had become important because of a promise kept, a promise shared with the girl who had never forgotten him. One evening, back in the garden where it had all begun, Lyra and Ethan sat together by the fountain. The water sparkled under the lights and the air was calm. Do you ever regret it? Ethan asked softly. Choosing this path, choosing me? Lyra turned to him, her expression gentle but certain. Never. The stars are vast, Ethan. My people are powerful, but none of it means anything without truth, and you are my truth. Ethan smiled, his heart lighter than it had ever been. For years he had carried the memory of a child's promise, unsure if it had been real. Now he knew. It had been real all along, and it had brought him here to this moment, to this life beside her. They held hands as the fountain whispered beside them, the station drifting quietly through space. The promise was not forgotten. It had become eternal.